I first heard about you from that guy, Art Bell, the GOAT.
The greatest.
Yeah, he was. I used to love listening to his show. Coming home from the Comedy Store, we'd come home at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And Coast to Coast with Art Bell from the Kingdom of Nye. It was awesome, and that's when I first got turned on to your work. So tell everybody you started off in law enforcement, right? That's your background,
Correct.
How did you get involved in this mystery of people going missing?
So I'd already written a couple of books, and I was at Yosemite National Park doing some research on another topic. And 2 rangers are following me around. And I went back to my room that was at the park, and about an hour and a half later, one of the rangers comes to my room, and he's in plain clothes, and he knocks on my door, and he says, "Hey, Dave, I'm Ranger so-and-so. I'm here off duty. I want to talk to you about some missing people." I said, "Come on." So we start talking, and he says that he knew about me, probably the way you knew about me. And he says, "I know you're from law enforcement. Somebody needs to look into this." About an hour and a half later, his partner shows up at the door. And they said that they've worked at different parks over the years. And while they were working at those parks, there were missing people. And he said at the beginning, there was a lot of publicity, a lot of people interested, a lot of activity. And then with time, within about 10, 15 days, all of that would end. And he said, we got concerned, and we did a Freedom of Information Act against our own agency to get the reports, and we couldn't get the reports. And then we did a Freedom of Information Act request on other cases, and we couldn't get the reports. And we got concerned because after that initial 10, 14-day period of searching is all over, there's nothing else that happens. That's it. And he said, somebody ought to look into this because there's a lot of people missing and the Park Service doesn't talk about it.
Now, what was he assuming? Was he assuming something nefarious was going on, or was he assuming that it was a lack of commitment to finding the bodies? Because you got to assume most people after 14 days lost in the woods are probably going to die.
I think all the above. He thought that there were too many people going missing. There wasn't enough follow-up being done. And nobody seemed to care.
So if you were being pragmatic and you weren't like diving into mysteries and the stuff that I like, the fun stuff, you would say, well, they don't have any resources. You know, there's not enough people to go looking. When you think about the actual square miles that you would have to cover to find a body, and then also the reality of predators and all these different animals that are going to eat bodies. If a body's there, there's not going to be much left. You spent time in the woods. Have you ever seen a dead mountain lion?
No, I've never seen a dead bear.
I've only seen dead bears because I was hunting. I've never seen a dead bear. Well, no, that's not true. No, we did find one. But I think it's very rare, but that one was recently dead. He was killed by another bear. I think most of the time when you find dead animals, it's very recent. And if an animal's dead and it's left alone in the woods within a certain amount of time, something's going to eat it. Everything's going to eat it, including the bones. There's almost nothing left by the time they get done with it.
100%.
Yeah.
But one thing I learned from being around rangers in all these years now is that there's few things that belong to us that we go into the woods with that are always going to be there. Namely our shoes.
Belt buckles,
leather anything, the rubber waistband of your underwear. These kind of things stay forever. A rifle, a pistol, a bow. And those things you're going to find. But getting back to the point of these guys, there were too many people going missing in a short period of time that no one seemed to care about. That was really their main focus. Mm-hmm. And somebody ought to look into it. Somebody ought to start collecting data. Nobody did. And maybe somebody from the outside, they're the inside, maybe somebody from the outside would have more luck putting this all together rather than them. That was kind of the gist of it.
Well, there's some cases that are just flat out weird. Like some cases, like people go missing, they die, animals eat them, that's a wrap. That makes sense to me. But there's a few cases, And one of them you covered was a guy, I believe he was from Canada, that went skiing in New York, and he went missing. And then he showed up 2,500 miles later in California with his ski clothes on, and he didn't know what happened.
Yeah, that was, he was a fireman from, I think, Toronto that went with a bunch of friends to New York on like a weekend ski trip. And the guys were all getting together at the end of the day to leave. They couldn't find him. He says he wakes up on a truck traveling from like Reno to Sacramento.
Woke up in the back of a truck?
No, sitting in the front seat. And he said that he was, as he wakes up, he's talking. It's not like he was asleep and woke up. It's like his mind suddenly flashed open. Hey, you're alive now. You can keep talking. And he goes, but I was talking to the driver, and we're traveling. The driver drops him off at Sacramento Airport. He doesn't remember anything, but he remembers his home phone number. He calls his wife in Toronto, and she goes, hey, everyone's searching for you, thinking you're still at the ski resort. He has all the ski clothes on.
How many days later?
I don't remember. But even he doesn't make sense of it. He doesn't know how he got in the truck. The truck driver left. Nobody knows who the truck driver was. That was kind of the whole story. It wasn't a lot.
So he didn't ask the truck driver, hey, where'd you pick me up?
I think he was embarrassed.
Just embarrassed that he was in the truck and doesn't remember how he got in there?
Yeah.
Okay, so he didn't say anything. And did he have any memories from skiing to, like, did he ever do, like, regressive hypnosis or anything?
If he did, it never went public.
Was that the weirdest one?
Oh, no, there's weirder ones.
What's the weirdest one you heard of?
The strangest disappearance story. There's a lot of people that disappear that don't have a memory. And if you look back and you study missing people, those people historically have been abducted. And there's something about that abduction experience where they can take away part of your mind.
You think alien abduction. That's what you're saying.
Alien entity.
Something.
Some type of
Okay.
foreign.
Just want to be clear, we're not talking about like a bad person abducting a person.
No,
Okay.
we're talking about some kind of entity.
Okay.
And they take away part of that mind where they were probably doing something to you that they don't want you to know.
Right.
And there's a lot of those. There's a whole segment of people that I have chronicled that were truck drivers who have amnesia, who were found in conditions that were very strange. There was a truck driver in the Midwest where salt of the earth kind of guy, drove independently, wife and a couple kids. He picks up a load. I want to say it was pigs. And his truck is found like outside of Indiana on a little 2-lane highway, stopped on the side of the road. He's not anywhere to be found, but his coat is found in a ditch on the other side of the other lane. So the sheriff comes out, they do a huge search, flyovers, canines, goes on for like 4 or 5 days. Nothing. Week and a half later, his body is found in that field, in the spot where they had searched all that time. Impossible to miss. Coroner says he's been dead for 2 weeks. Well, the sheriff can't make sense of that because he searched that with dogs and people. That guy should have been there. But Joe, I have 1,500 of those cases where canines were brought in, multiple canine teams, multiple searches, and people were not found. And the point I try to make about this is that it's not that the searchers are inept, because I don't believe that. And I don't believe that the canines fail multiple times, because I don't believe that can happen. I don't believe they were there when they were searching. They were left there later on.
And so you've been into this for a long time, right? What was the first case that you looked into that got you thinking that something weird's going on?
Probably would have been at Yosemite. And there was a girl named Stacy Harris. And she, just weirdly, she grew up like 5 miles from me. I grew up in a little city, Cupertino, California. She grew up in Saratoga, the next town over. She went with her dad on a trip by horse sponsored by a contractor in the park at Yosemite, and they were going to ride into this place called the High Sierra Camp. Her and her dad and 5 other people. And they get escorted in by a cowboy contractor, and they come to these cabins. And her dad's an older guy. They get to the cabin, and she says, "Hey, Dad, I want to go over here to the point. I want to take some pictures." She brings her camera. And one of the guys, a 72-year-old guy, is sitting at that point, and she goes, "I'm going to go right there and sit with him and take some pictures." He goes, "Sure." Dad watches her walk out. They sits down. Old guy, barely could ride the horse. She's taking pictures. She gets up, and down at the bottom of the hill, there's a small lake. And surrounding the lake, there's trees. She walks down into the trees, presumably to take pictures of the lake, but she doesn't come back. Big search. I'm talking about one of the biggest searches in Yosemite history. And they find the lens cap to her camera inside that path in the tree line. They never find her. And that happened 46 years ago. I filed the Freedom of Information Act for that report and all the investigation into it, and I get denied. I appealed. I got denied. Finally, a special agent from the Park Service, just so people know, the Park Service has uniformed police officers, National Park Service police, that patrol their parks. And they go to the National Law Enforcement Academy. Up above them, they have special agents, detectives. And they are doing all the follow-up work that the police officers in the field do. This case goes to a special agent. There's been nothing done on this case in 40 years. The special agent calls me. "Why do you want the case?" I said, "Well, that's an irrelevant question according to FOIA. You can't ask that." And he goes, "Well, I want to know." I said, "Well, it's been 47 years. I doubt anyone's looked at it. Have you looked at it?" "No, nobody's looked at it." I said, "Well, I'd like a copy of it just to understand what happened." He goes, "You're never going to get the case." This guy's name was Special Agent U. Why you? I said, "Why?" And he says, "None of your business. You're never going to get it." I said, "First of all, why talk to me like that? I'm prior law enforcement. I'm not being rude. I just want to know." He goes, "Forget it. Drop it. You're never going to see it." I said, "No, I want that case." And he goes, "You've never seen any other missing person case, and you're not going to see this one." I said, "Whoa, I have over 30 missing person cases from your agency from around the United States that I've FOIA'd before and I've received." "You're a liar. You said that to me." I said, "No, I'm not a liar. I don't lie. And this is the truth." And he goes, "Well, you're not getting this one." "Anything else you want to know?" I said, "No, I think you've done it." And that was it. In that amount of time, I've really found out nothing more about the Stacey Ayers case. 14-year-old girl, disappeared, never found. Nobody's ever done anything on the case in 40 years. I still haven't seen it. Now, I talked to Tim Burchett, who you had in here the other day. And I explained to him, I want a meeting with Burgum. And I want to lay out what I have and explain the obstruction.
Who's Burgum?
The head of the Department of the Interior.
Okay.
Doug Burgum.
Okay.
And explain to him the obstructions that are happening in his agency. Those are our reports. If nobody's looked at it in 40 plus years, what does it matter if I have it?
Right. The people that were working back then aren't working anymore. It's not like anyone's going to get in trouble.
No, half of them are dead.
Right.
And Tim said, "Okay, I'll have my people get a hold of you." They got a hold of me. They said that they called DOI. They said that DOI people said, "Yeah, we'll get a hold of you." I called them 3 times. They won't call me back.
So what do you think's going on?
So when you look at the totality of, and let's just talk about Yosemite. As I dug into it, there's probably over 50 people missing in Yosemite as we talk right now. When I asked for a list from Yosemite, from the Department of the Interior 12 years ago, they said they don't have a list. I asked for a list of missing people from the entire system in the Department of the Interior. They said we don't have a list. And I said, well, okay, I've written so many books. I'm a printed author. I'm going to ask you to put that list together for me. According to the rules, I fit that criteria to ask.
But they said they don't have a list.
Right. But I asked them to put one together.
Okay.
And they said, we'll get back to you. They said, no, you don't qualify. But if you want us to put together a list from the entire system, it's going to cost you $1.4 million. If you want a list from Yosemite, that's going to cost you $34,000. So that got me really upset. Over the next 2 years, I put the list together. Joe, the third year, you know what Yosemite did? They released a list of missing people from Yosemite. So I know I got all the people from Yosemite. I wrote about them in my books. They still haven't released a list from the entire system.
So do you think they released it because you were pressuring them? No, so like this, you could look at it a bunch of different ways. I'm trying to like look at it from the skeptic's perspective. You'd say, well, this is clear. A bunch of people don't want to do their job. They're lazy. They don't like this guy coming along and asking for information. But you think there's something weird going on.
So a FOIA I found on their website that was sent to him in 2011. It says that the appeal was properly invoked because of exemptions 7A. And I'll let you read that, what that is.
7A permits the withholding of records or information compiled for law enforcement purposes, but only to the extent that the production of such law enforcement records or information could reasonably be expected to interfere with enforcement proceedings. So they could withhold it because you could interfere with enforcement proceedings?
40 years later. Or
That's
30 years later, I guess.
That's fucking weird. The exemption is intended to prevent premature disclosure of the investigatory materials that might be used in law enforcement action. 40 years later?
Yeah, it says the incident is still on. In criminal investigations, the incident is still ongoing.
40 years later? What? Okay. Tinfoil hat firmly placed on your head. What do you think's going on?
So first of all, missing people investigations are not criminal investigations.
Right.
There's nothing criminal about disappearing. If it's a criminal investigation and there's criminal aspects to it, it shouldn't be a missing person case. It ought to be suspicious circumstances investigated by a criminal investigator.
Right.
It has a classification as a missing person. And what they're not saying there is, what about the other 40 cases I've already gotten from them that are since that are missing person cases?
Right. So that's a little weird, but I could also see incompetent people that don't want to work. They don't want to do their job, and they're like, fuck this guy. I don't want to do his work. I don't want to go. Why is he asking me for this information? He's just a kooky author. I could see that. But, like, what do you think might be going on with these people?
So when I was in law enforcement, I worked on the SWAT team, and we had canines assigned to our team. Joe, I can't ever remember us looking for someone with a dog and the dog didn't find the person.
Right.
I have 1,200 to 1,500 cases where they bring a canine to find a missing person and the dog can't track, won't track, or turns around, comes down and sits down and is not interested in tracking. That's totally outside the behavior of a dog.